All right, today we're diving into the story of one Ukrainian doctor and the incredible series of battles that ultimately led him to war. These are the powerful words of Mykola Koryanov, a 30-year-old medic from Kyiv. He said this back in March 2014, right as he was volunteering for the Ukrainian army. You can feel it in his words, right? For him, this threat, it wasn't some abstract political idea. It was a dark echo of his country's history.
So what makes a doctor, a healer, pick up a uniform and head straight into a conflict? Well, his decision didn't just come out of nowhere. To really get it, we have to rewind the clock. We have to look at the battles he was already fighting, long before a single shot was ever fired.
So, let's talk about his first war, because it wasn't fought on a battlefield. We're going back to 2011. Koryanov is a young doctor, and he finds himself fighting a totally different kind of enemy, a broken medical system. He was literally fighting for the basic tools he needed just to save lives.
See, on the surface, everything looked great. You had officials staging these big, impressive disaster drills for the Euro 2012 soccer tournament. It was all for show. But the reality for medics like Koryanov, it was a completely different story. They were working with what they called tin cans, not modern ambulances. The difference between the promise and the reality was just staggering.
And here's the crazy part. The money was actually there. In 2011, the government approved this huge, life-saving investment. We're talking over 200 million hryvnias for hundreds of new ambulances and even mobile ICUs. So, where did they go?
Well, a year goes by, the deadline comes and goes, and these life-saving vehicles? Poof, nowhere to be seen on the streets. And then, some investigative journalists dig in and make this absolutely shocking discovery. 100 of the brand new ambulances were found not at hospitals, but just sitting there collecting dust in the back lot of a private car dealership. Can you believe that?
So what was the official story? The ministry claimed, they were low quality, they weren't up to standard. But the journalists? They pointed to something else entirely. It turns out the company that won the contract had some very strong connections to a powerful politician on the Parliamentary Health Committee.
And for Mykola Koryanov, this wasn't just some political scandal you read about in the paper. This had a real, devastating human cost. A patient died on his shift, and he was absolutely convinced that person could have been saved if they just had the right equipment. That was his breaking point.
So he did something about it. He couldn't just stay silent. He filed a formal complaint, he talked to the media, and the very system he was trying to fix, it turned on him, hard. He got hit with official reprimands, they slashed his pay, and in the end, they forced him to resign. He lost his job. For what? For telling the truth.
But his fight against this broken system, it didn't just stop when he lost his job. In fact, it was just getting started. He challenged the decay he saw in the country's healthcare, but now he was about to confront a different kind of decay, one that went right to its cultural identity.
Okay, so fast forward to 2013. Koryanov is now continuing his medical education at a postgraduate academy, and it's here that he runs into another battle. This one was maybe more subtle, more insidious, but it was a fight for the very cultural soul of his country.
What he was confronting was this deep-rooted issue called Russification. It's basically a form of cultural assimilation, where non-Russian communities like in Ukraine are pressured, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, to give up their own language and culture in favor of the Russian one. And this was happening inside state institutions like his university. So, in the classroom, he's hit with this startling reality. Ukrainian is the official state language, right? But he found that something like 3 out of every 4 of his lectures were being taught in Russian. And think about it, for a doctor who learned his entire medical vocabulary in Ukrainian, this wasn't just a matter of preference, it was a serious professional barrier. So what does he do? Exactly what he did before. He files a formal complaint, and the administration's response was this quick promise, don't worry, for you, tomorrow everything will be in Ukrainian. But tomorrow, well, it never really came. The very next day, one lecturer just wasn't prepared to teach in Ukrainian, and others just kept on using Russian. The promise was empty. And again, for Koryanov, this wasn't just about language. It was so much bigger. He saw it as the continuation of a long historical struggle. He drew a direct line from what he was experiencing to figures like Alexei Hirnik, a dissident who, decades earlier, had actually burned himself to death to protest this exact thing, Russification. So in Koryanov's mind, that same fight for Ukraine's identity, it was still being fought, right there in his own university.
And that brings us full circle. We're back to 2014,
and Mykola Koryanov is on his way to join the army. He'd fought these battles inside the system, right? Now he was about to face one from the outside.
And this is so crucial to understand. His decision to volunteer, it wasn't some sudden, impulsive act. It was the logical, final step in a long journey. You can see the evolution, can't you? First, he's the whistleblower fighting a rotten system. Then, he's the activist defending his language and culture. And finally, he becomes the volunteer, the soldier, protecting his nation's future. Each fight just led directly into the next one.
It's like the sickness he had been fighting from inside the country. The corruption, the cultural suppression. It had now literally manifested as a physical threat on the borders. The fight wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was real.
So, when we zoom out, what does this one man's story really tell us about the much larger conflict?
And this, right here, is the key takeaway. His personal struggles, for a working ambulance, for the right to learn in his own language, they were never separate from the nation's struggle. His story is like a microcosm of Ukraine's larger fight, a fight for its own health, its own identity, a battle to finally be free from the ghosts of its past.
And his journey leaves us with this powerful question to think about, maybe with an answer too. Sometimes, the person who tries to heal a nation's sickness from the inside is the very same person who has to pick up a weapon to defend it from the outside.